I think for a while I thought that I needed to strip away everything that made me think I was in a game. I thought that immersion meant it was like, okay, in order to be immersed in a game, I have to like forget I'm playing a game. So I shouldn't have like pause menus. I shouldn't have like inventory. Like, no, I want it to feel like I am this person, and I just have to work with the same tools that they have, and that doesn't bother me anymore.
Thank you for listening to Games by Design, our podcast where we share our experience with video games. Thank you for listening to Games by Design, our podcast where we share our experience with video games and discuss what is swell or unswell about said video games. I'm Zach Dunlap, and I'll be hosting this episode, joined today by my brother Nick.
Whoa!
And Aaron Bone.
Hey!
In this episode, we'll each take a turn posing some game design questions to the group, then spend some time discussing said questions. At the end, we'll share some game recommendations for each other and for you, our hypothetical listener, to consider playing. So, Nick,
Yeah.
We're going to start with your discussion segments for today.
Okay.
So, take it away, Aaron.
Can do. All right. So recently, I tried out the new System Shock demo on Steam, which, if you're not aware, is a remake by Night Dive Studios of the original from 1994 by Looking Glass Studios. So I decided I was going to give the demo a try. I thought it looked pretty, and that was literally my entire reason for trying it out. It was free, so... when I started it, though, I found myself feeling super immersed for a different reason. I instantly had the feeling that this wasn't a game that was going to protect me from myself. The freaky mutant zombies didn't have glowing outlines that helped me pick them out. There was no regenerating health. Things were happening around me, even when I wasn't paying attention. The game was handing me very little, and I loved it. I had a pistol with literally 2 shots in it. That was the weapon it gave me, as well as like a lead pipe or whatever, because games. And so the pretty lights and the colors, which were very pretty, mind you, it is a very pretty game, soon became totally irrelevant. I felt like the game world was real, like it was dangerous, and that I really needed to pay attention.
Interesting.
So I feel like I've had this experience before with a few other games, like Deus Ex, multiple Deus Ex games, which range from very pretty games to very not pretty games, and games like Subnautica, Hitman, and to a lesser degree Dishonored, and some others. But the super immersive feeling of these games was the same whether the game had super janky controls, such as the original Deus Ex, weird abstract menus, such as in Subnautica, or super simple animations, such as in like Hitman. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about immersion in this sense. Immersion on another level of just being pretty. Something that I think spans genres from the aptly named immersive sim to survival games to open world sandboxes and side-scrolling platformers. I think it has to do with making a player feel like a person in the world. So what experiences have you had with immersion, or feeling like the word's a little vague, but feeling like you really existed, or you were controlling a character that really existed in a game space beyond the graphical? What games have made you feel that way, and why do you think they work?
I think that's a fascinating idea, because I think at first, to me, it was a lot about graphical fidelity. I'd look at a game and be like, yeah, that looks kind of old school, or that doesn't look real, so I don't think I'm really going to get into a game. Mm-hmm. But then when I've actually tried games like that, playing, pixelated game like Celeste, or, side-scroller like Hollow Knight, or, a game like Crusader Kings, where there isn't even really a, discernible, character to move around, or, doing anything with. and I find myself still incredibly immersed in those games. And it is really interesting. I think a lot of it has to do with kind of the game being consistent to its rules, that you feel like you can trust the game world, that you can interact with it in a way that responds to you in a consistent way. I know we've talked about this before with player agency and trust for the game, but I think that does do a lot to immerse you. And then I think, for me personally, I really get immersed when there's character to what I'm playing. Even in something like Hollow Knight, you really have no idea what your little main bug character is or where he comes from or what he is, but there's enough there, and in like the few NPCs you interact with and kind of the world, that there's character in that character. It's like, oh, this is an interesting thing. This isn't just some cipher, just some little dude. Like, there's some substance there. So I think at least for me that helps, that even, or like something with Celeste, like I came to really adore the character of Madeline, even though she just was a smudgy pixel, in there, because of the interactions she had with the world, and because you kind of understood this struggle. It was just showed through little portraits and little lines of dialogue. So I think the game being consistent to its rules, that it feels like that it kind of has some substance. It feels like it has history, or even something with Crusader Kings, that even if you're not seeing or moving around yourself and interacting with characters, that the world kind of builds on its own in an organic way, that you feel connected to it. Honestly, I'm just kind of rambling my thoughts because I think it's an interesting concept that I haven't fully realized, but I think those are some elements that can help with immersion.
Yeah. I was gonna say some similar stuff. I was thinking about The Witcher, which is a game that I get so. The Witcher 3 specifically is a game that I get so like. Just steeped in, like I feel like I'm in the world, and the world feels so real, and the danger of The Witcher feels so threatening because it's so compelling and so real, and I think a lot of it has to do with the characters and how they feel like real people, and how real things will happen to them, good and bad, and they'll have real believable interactions. And I think it does. I think that a certain amount of visual fidelity can help with this kind of thing, because so much. Like The Witcher, I don't think it would work as well in doing what it does if it didn't look a little more on the realism side. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, okay, this is a grounded, realistic kind of person, and it's kind of funny. It probably won't seem that way in 10 years, but like now it feels like oh yeah, that's what a person looks like generally, or it's close enough that I'll buy that. And like a part of this isn't even a game design thing. I think when it comes to character, like it's a writing thing, and that's kind of the thing about game design and all artistic, creative kind of things, is that there's a fair amount of overlap, and it's not just that we're talking about game design mechanical stuff. We're talking about sometimes writing, and we're talking about art and things like that, or music, like we talked about a couple episodes ago when we did the Outer Wilds thing. I was going to say character is a thing, but again, that's a writing thing, not so much a game design thing. And then when it comes to game design, I agree with Aaron that if it's consistent, that helps a lot. Mostly because I really notice it when it's not consistent. An example would be, this is going to be a running gag, in Skyrim.
No way.
You have this lock-picking skill, and you can pick a bunch of locks. You know, like most things can have their locks picked if you have the lock pick item and the skill to do it or whatever. But sometimes you'll go up to a locked chest or a locked door, and you'll be like, and you've gone through, and you know, and you've picked like these really, really difficult locks, you know, like these high security locks that you're supposed to pick or whatever. But sometimes you'll go up to a door or a lock or a chest or something, and you'll try to pick the lock, and it won't even let you try it. It'll just say, this lock cannot be picked. It requires a key. As if every other lock in the world has not required a key. And that is
every other lock is a lock-picked lock.
Yeah, I know. It's like, well, yeah, no, all of these other locks, I guess, were built for lock pickers, not keys. But these locks, these like, you know, 5 or whatever.
So true.
Isn't that weird? I think that is so jarring every time I run into something like that.
It's, that consistency. Versus something like the original Deus Ex, where every door in the game could be opened, if I'm understanding. I never finished it, but like my experience with it was, there's a door here, there's a lock on it, and this door has the same properties as any other door. So this door can be blown up with explosives. This robot over here happens to explode. So if I explode this robot in front of this door, that door is going to blow up. Yeah. Anytime, every time. No door is immune to that.
Yeah. But I think that's my thing, is that like, just from a pure game design thing, setting aside all the writing and characterization and stuff, if it's, consistency is huge for me. Like if you, for that reason, you know, the lock thing is a really great example. There's a lot of other ones where it's like a physics simulation, but then sometimes you'll get locked into some animation that defies the physics because it wants to do a certain animation instead, and that's a little bit weird. And you know, it's just stuff like that. But
yeah.
Gotcha.
To be honest, I'm not too worried about visual stuff most of the time. It has more to do with the mechanics, because I kind of come into it with the expectation that like the visual stuff is representative, but the mechanics, I mean, mechanics are what make a game, right? Like otherwise it would just be a movie or something like that.
Yeah.
But if the mechanics, and so when I go into a game, I'm expecting some at least mechanical consistency, if not a graphical fidelity or something like that. And so I agree with you, Aaron, is what I'm saying.
I think when it comes to the graphics, to the visuals, to the performance of a game, I think a lot of it's with the expectation. If you know what kind of game, you know, you're expecting going into, it's like, oh, this is a pixelated platformer game, it's going to look like this, or this is, real state-of-the-art, brand new, immersive, you know, open world RPG or whatever, and it's like touting its graphics, then you know what to expect. I think when I get pulled out of it, or when it does bug me, or I lose that immersion, is when that is inconsistent. It's like, oh, this game is supposed to be, have this high graphical fidelity, and then like something is off, or like something's not working, or you get like a weird, glitch or animation or something, which, happens in those types of games. But it's almost like why, certain earlier games, or, those pixelated games, or like animated style, they're a bit more timeless, because they're not trying to have that level of graphical fidelity and that level of immersion, so you can buy right into it. You don't have to have that period of, it's like, okay, well, first I need to get in the mindset of somebody playing this in 2004, and then I can appreciate what it's trying to do. Which is what sometimes I feel like I have to do. I started playing the original Devil May Cry, and which I guess came out in like 2001 or 2002. Wow. It's an old game, and like when it gets really janky, or there's like this wall jump that you can do that's just really inconsistent, and it's kind of like the fixed camera, but it kind of follows you and can kind of move around, and there's kind of a 3D space. And to appreciate it, I basically was like, okay, if I was playing this, way back then, and this is kind of video games, and it also didn't tell you how to do anything, because it was back when it expected you to read a huge manual, to know what to do. And it's like, okay, if I was doing this, it's like, okay, I can get this now, and I just kind of had to put myself in that space to, get immersed. But yeah, there's like that disconnect because it's like, okay, this isn't. I'm not feeling it, with how games are right now.
Yeah, and immersion is a general term I recognize, and so I think I'm gonna a more specific follow-up question. When do you take the game world seriously? What does it take for you to start making decisions as if you were a character in the world, or to, because like jumping back to my example with System Shock, I hopped into this game and was like, okay, cool, pretty game, and then all of a sudden I had 2 shots in my gun and there were zombies everywhere and I was terrified, and I was searching every corner for some kind of supplies or resources, or I had needs I needed to manage, and these things all affected me, and were causing me to make decisions like my character would. But like, what causes you to take the game world seriously, and to approach it? Because like when you're playing Celeste, for instance, Celeste is a ton of fun, but it's not like, and I love Celeste. I don't play Celeste. I play Celeste like a platformer. Like it's a game about jumping and moving and levels, and it's clear that there's like a designed path, the way you're supposed to play the game. It's been prepared for you. But when I'm trying to say this, I think that's a different kind of immersion than what I'm talking about here, and I want to know about like consistency, taking the world seriously, stuff like that. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
You're talking about like getting into the mind of the
character
that you're doing,
making decisions like they would. What does it take?
Oh man. Well, here's a thought. Man, I got a couple thoughts. Well, my first thought is that I think that 2 things. First thing, if I'm facing the same challenges as my character is facing, if I'm kind of dealing with the same stuff that my character is dealing with, and I don't mean like, I mean like in the game, like if my character is thirsty and there's a mechanical need for that drink, then I will be focused on and thinking about getting that drink as if
your character.
So I control my character to do something that I imagine he would do in that situation as well, So for one thing, if there's a mechanical reason, kind of like going back to episode whatever when we talked about that, the Skyrim one, where episode 6, where we talked about the Skyrim sweet roll dilemma.
Yeah.
But so that helps a lot, and because if there's no mechanical need to do something, but the game makes me do it anyway, then it makes it harder for me to feel like I and the character are one. Yeah. Because the game told me that I need to do it as the player, but the character doesn't actually need it. Yeah. So it's a little bit jarring there.
Versus like, if you're playing Far Cry 2 and your character's dying of malaria, like, you have to handle that. Right. But if the game's just like, hey, you should go over there because that's what I want you to do, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. So connected to the mechanics for me is a big thing when it comes to game design, because I feel like that's what makes games unique, is like that, and why I play video games instead of just watching a movie or a TV show is because it's got mechanics and interactiveness and like needs and systems and simulations going on, and that's, and to different degrees depending on the game or whatever, but like the second thought, if you don't mind me moving on,
please,
is that I think that we talk about role-playing characters sometimes as if we talk about role-playing. I'm saying role-playing in quotation marks here because I'm not entirely sure that's what this is, but we don't necessarily need to do something in a game, or we feel like this character would want this, even though we as the player don't want that. So we make the character do that. And I know that not everybody plays games that way. I do it sometimes, but I know that a lot of people do. Whether it's a tabletop RPG like Dungeons and Dragons or a video game. And I think that oh man, I wish I had more of a thing. I think that for me, it's still I guess my point is it goes back to that. It still needs to have a mechanical thing. The character needs to need it, and I need to want it, and it needs to be like we're going through the same thing, wanting the same thing, trying to get the same thing. The character and I, in order for me to feel really immersed in it, because it doesn't quite work for me when I need to invent headcanon and stuff explaining why my character is doing something when in game he doesn't need to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I just had a quick thought. We're talking about a lot of systemic games here, but I think it even benefits something as linear as like The Last of Us, because there are these gameplay segments in The Last of Us where you are. It's basically it just becomes pure gameplay. The story kind of checks out for a little while, and you're in charge of getting to your objective. And you've got limited resources, and you're having to manage your health and your resources and all this stuff. It's usually really tense. And it's purely mechanical. But you're managing the same needs that your character is managing.
Yeah.
And so when it gets back to these more narrative bits, I think that the more gameplay-driven bits really cement your relationship with this character and get you... I don't know, when I was doing that, get you on the same page so that you're more invested when the narrative bits roll around. I think The Last of Us is best played. I think that's why another reason that games, it's good to... playing a game is a different experience, because like when you're playing The Last of Us, you are bandaging your arm and you are crafting ammunition.
And you're desperately looking for resources and things for that. Yeah.
And so it builds some... sympathy between you and Joel, and I think it makes you more invested.
Yeah, and it doesn't put the burden. The game allows you to instead of requiring you as the player to invent the connection between you and the player, it like just naturally is there, and it's obvious, and it just makes it so easy to sink into the character and be on the same wavelength as the character. That's the way I feel about it again.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've been thinking about a similar thing. That it's hard for me to pinpoint, in these games is like, oh, what is it actively, doing that's making me immersed or what it's not, because so often I do play games, maybe, just as a kind of form of escapism, but to really just I want to buy into the world. I want to be immersed in the characters. So sometimes even when it's not there, I'll bring that, into the game. Yeah. Like, for example, both me and my brother were playing this Assassin's Creed game. And at one point, I've been playing this game for, several hours. And my brother asked me, oh, can you attack civilians in the town in this game? And I was just like, I don't know. I have not done that because my character would not attack civilians in town.
Yeah.
But he was playing the game to just kind of exploit, whatever game mechanic, physics, fun, chaos, mayhem he could out of it. So he's like, oh yeah, no, I played. And they like come and beat you up and they gang up on you. And if you burn them, this happens. Like, oh wow, like that's... I wouldn't have considered to do that in play style. So it kind of depends how you play the game as well and how you want to experience the game. Whether you're immersed or not.
Yeah, I really like the idea of linking needs, of using needs to connect the player and the character, because like in Assassin's Creed, there's no need to interact with those systems. You don't need to kill people, and if you want to, you kind of have to come up with some reason to do it. But if you're playing something where there's a need to defend yourself or something from a mob or something like that. There's a... I feel like it's easier to get into the headspace, like you were saying, Zach, when you don't have to invent your own narrative.
Yeah.
Which is nothing new for us. I mean, like, I think Aaron summed it up really well in our 6th episode when we were talking about the same kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to... You want to be role-playing the choices that your character makes. You don't want to be coming up with the consequences that he has to deal with and then trying to enforce them on yourself and your character in a way that doesn't fit with the gameplay that you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, it's like the game design should be set up in such a way that encourages the player to, immerse themselves in the game. That they're not fighting against what the game wants them to do versus, how it's set up.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you guys for your thoughts. Sorry, I was. Thanks for bearing with me. I was a little rambly, and I kind of took a little bit to get to the point, but I think we talked about some cool things, and
No, that's great. I mean, because a lot of things are kind of subjective and a little less concrete. So, I think we only really discover any more about these ideas by dancing around it a little bit to figure out. I don't know what it's not, and so
what it's not. Yeah, that's
for real.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for dancing with me.
It's a good dance.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nick. That was good. And I think that when we get to my segment, we might be retreading a little bit of that ground.
Okay.
But from a different angle, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, great.
But we'll take a break from that, and we'll do Aaron. What do you got for us today?
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of dancing and meandering, so my idea about game design actually came from not a video game but a card game that I was playing. So I was introduced to this card game. It's called Unstable Unicorns, and
right.
yes, very very manly, deep immersive. It's kind of in the same vein as like Exploding Kittens or those other zany, quirky, violent card games. The idea is to end up with a certain amount of unicorns and to prevent your opponent from acquiring unicorns through various devious, violent, magical ways. Anyway, fun enough concept, but there's this certain element in the game that I think horribly off-balanced it and killed any kind of motivation or desire for competitiveness I had in this game. And I'm going to relate to Exploding Kittens again because I think it's a more well-known game. But in that game, you have these action cards, and then you also have this nope card, which can rescind any action, that's being played against you. However, in Exploding Kittens, those are pretty rare cards. Like, you don't want to just use them for whatever. In this Unstable Unicorn game, I swear there's like 20 of them in this deck. And so I would be playing this game and strategizing. It's like, okay, I could play this card, and then use this, and if I took out that unicorn. And then, in one turn, I play this action, and then the other player nays it, because unicorns, horses, neigh. Very clever. Yeah. And then, there's options like, oh, well, I was prepared for that. I have my own neigh, so I neigh that. It's like, well, then I neigh that neigh. And it's like, okay, well, I don't really know how to play if you're just going to throw these at me. And then, another turn, it's like, okay, they used up all their neighs. I'm going to try this again. They have, 3 more. And then I'm looking through the deck. And yeah, there's 20 of them. So it's kind of my idea is about, this idea with the game design and with balance and, the point of when something can become so unbalanced or so, just one-sided that it kind of kills your motivation to want to keep going with it. So, yeah, I guess, are there games that you feel like you've experienced that, or what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I think I'm familiar with that feeling.
So the feeling of there's just some element that, some confounding strategy or some confounding.
I mean, if I'm reading it right, Aaron, you're saying that it's kind of that feeling of my actions don't mean anything because they're just canceled out all the time or whatever. Yeah.
And in kind of a random, you can't, the game encourages, in every other sense, it encourages kind of strategy and knowing the cards, but then there's enough of these just cancel out cards that it kind of just has this random chaos that you can't really plan for it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you got it.
I have a quick thought is that I think that a certain element of randomness can really be fun, especially in games that are about strategy and planning and stuff, because I think what happens in a lot of these games is it's possible to plan so meticulously and so far ahead that first of all you might be overwhelmed by how far ahead you have to plan or whatever. And then also you have the problem of it may not be fun because you've just planned everything out and it just goes according to plan, and after your initial plan, like it just, there's smooth sailing, no challenges, nothing. And so a certain amount of random works really well. We see that in like Crusader Kings was the game that we played together, and like that's a high strategy, grand strategy thing with so many moving parts. But the fact that there's so many moving parts, and even a certain element of like chance, some dice roll kind of stuff going on behind the scenes, like I think it really, really enhances the experience.
Yeah, the information horizon is never too far out.
Yeah,
and so you're never overwhelmed because you know that planning
2
years in the future, or ludicrous amounts, isn't gonna.
It's not feasible,
and so you don't worry about overwhelming yourself with that.
Yeah, that is nice. However, it definitely doesn't always work, but I don't know that the culprit is always randomness, because sometimes I think it is, and I think maybe in this game, Unstable Unicorns, maybe it is the game experience that they were trying to make. Maybe they've delivered it exactly. I think I'd be in the same boat as you, Aaron. If I was designing this game, I'd probably want it to be less of that stuff, so that you could actually strategize, and so that your actions actually did have meaning to them. And maybe they just didn't test out all of the balance yet, or whatever, or maybe that's what they wanted.
And I think it is the balancing issue, because again, I think the random, like you've said, can work really well and add this unpredictability and add this additional challenge. And as I mentioned before, with another card game in the same vein, I think something like Exploding Kittens works a lot better because those kind of random things to throw off somebody are a bit more rare and a bit more, you have to kind of pick and choose when it shows up, or something like an exploding kitten that you have to deal with. There's just a few of those in the deck. If it was every other card, if you're playing Crusader Kings and like every other time you try to start a battle, there's like a natural disaster that kills your entire army.
Yeah.
It would be pretty disheartening and hard to you'd just be like, oh, what's the point?
Yeah. And I think that maybe it's just a balance thing for this one. And I think that the use of random RNG, random number generation or whatever it is, randomness in games, it's a tool that can be used poorly and effectively. I think that you can still accomplish the same frustration without it. And it's funny, the thing that came to mind was actually that sometimes I'll be playing a game, particularly like a AAA game, and I'll be working really hard. I'll be thinking, I'll be strategizing and stuff like that, because most of the games I play are more systemic and strategy and challenging and things like that. I tend to prefer that. But and so I go into like a AAA game with the expectation that that's what I need to do, and so I'm planning and I'm working really hard and I'm thinking really hard about stuff, and then I realized that I over-prepared by like 300%. And that's really frustrating, because it's like, well, all of that hard work, like, do I even need to try in this game? Do I even, like, all that hard work I did was completely wasted, Yeah. And so there's kind of a different inverted kind of way of frustrating your players by making it feel like their choices don't matter, because any choice would be fine, or significantly less effort would also be acceptable,
I had kind of a different experience, but you talking about like more, well, let me just say it. So when I play XCOM, I liked planning ahead and trying to do research and for my missions and stuff like that, and make sure I was ready to take on whatever challenge came on. And there were story beats that would hit, and it's funny because those aren't random. those are planned, they're scripted, but they would get in the way. And if you knew when they came up, you could actually like plan to avoid certain story beats because you knew, oh, when I research this technology, that means this enemy's going to appear. So if I don't want that to happen, it's pretty silly. But I think that even scripted story beats can be really frustrating if they aren't like the rest of the game. You know, if suddenly the game breaks its rules and says, okay, now there's an alien spaceship all of a sudden. You're like, what? This wasn't part of the game before this.
Yeah.
This is a brand new game element that, I was not aware of.
Yeah. And now we've just touched on the whole mechanical consistency thing again, which makes me think that this is important to us. We should probably add that to our list of things.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, your little measuring stick we're bringing against the games that we play.
Yeah.
That reminds me, my brother, I think he was playing, I think it was Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and there was like this mission where it gave him the choice of, in some indirect way, he was kind of deciding who would become the ruler of this area, or kind of who to favor with. And he made this one choice because he thought it would create this interesting dynamic, between these two people. But then when he made the choice, there's just this cut scene where that character is killed. And to me, I'm watching, it's like, okay, I think whoever you chose, it would probably have a similar event until it got to what the game had planned to happen. So if you have it in your mind, it's like, oh man, this would create this interesting dynamic and that would be a fun story thing to explore. And it's like, no, that was just so you could think that maybe something interesting would happen. But I don't even know. Like, why would the game give you that choice?
Twists are something that in all fiction you gotta be really careful with. And
because of mechanical and storytelling consistency.
Yeah, because
it's okay to have a twist if you've set it up appropriately in your story or in your game with mechanics or with the plot threads that have led up to that point.
Yeah, mechanically just as well as narratively. Right. Yeah, because like if you're playing, some space game and all of a sudden the aliens have new aliens that came out of nowhere and like there was a logic to things before now and now there's, something new that the game did not set up, but it's a new mechanical challenge. You're not prepared for it, and it's really frustrating, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, from a storytelling perspective, it's kind of the same thing as with a Deus Ex Machina.
Exactly.
It's like this new thing we haven't established comes and solves connects the story threads, resolves things.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because you're like, and I think a compelling story comparing narrative, and I think just with game design in general, what's compelling about the consistency is that you can kind of follow along with it, and when it's vague, you can fill in like, oh, what's going to happen? I bet this could happen, or these things could happen, or maybe the game wants me to do this or this, and then when it, comes out of nowhere with something entirely different, then you feel like you've wasted that mental energy in trying to engage with it.
Yeah, in kind of a similar way to what I was talking about when I'm overworking in a game that doesn't require very much of you. Yeah. It's like, well, great, thanks, game, movie, book, TV show. I was thinking really hard about it. Apparently, you weren't.
That's so frustrating. I had experience playing Shadow of War where it'd be like I'd get ready to like take on this orc or whatever, and I'd set up this big old ambush. Come to find that, just like literally every other orc in the game, I could kill him in a 1-on-1 fight or a 1-on-10 fight because I'm, immortal.
Because you're a god.
Yeah. So it's frustrating.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that you brought up, Aaron. And I think that we've kind of touched on two separate ways that you can really frustrate the player, which by making them feel that that their choices don't matter or that their investment doesn't matter, which is you make it so that it cancels out what you do, by like kind of like your nope or your nay thing in your unicorn game, and so like it just stops every choice from having consequences because because it just, stops you or whatever. Or it just makes it so that like you don't need to really make a choice in order to have the outcome that you want, or not as much of a choice as you may want to invest, or not as much investment as you want to invest.
Yeah.
And maybe that's kind of going back to the immersion thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Go ahead.
Like I want to, like Aaron was saying, he wants to invest. He wants to sink into these worlds and like get lost in them and make it feel like it's real and everything like that. So you want to invest a lot of mental energy and like thought and emotional attachment to it. But if it, makes it harder for you to do that by having mechanical inconsistency or like just and all those other things, writing, animation, whatever it is that then that's going to be really hard to immerse yourself into and get invested in, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and if it sets up like a certain, I don't know, if it sets up I think there's this other thing that can happen where it sets up narratively that this is going to be big or this is going to be hard, and then it's not. And so like you spend time preparing, and which is, I think, a reason I really appreciate like the old Deus Ex and stuff is that like it's willing to be challenging when it's supposed to be hard. And that can be kind of alienating. But for me, it was like, okay, I really got to think about this. And I know the game's not going to let me down because the game has been consistent up to this point. I know it's not going to throw something crazy in at the last minute to help me.
Yeah.
I know it's not going to give me a super beam during the boss fight. That drives me nuts. I hate when I'm playing a boss fight and I get a superpower that I didn't have for the rest of the game all of a sudden to fight this boss. Like, frick! In other games that I otherwise really enjoy, that drives me nuts.
But because it comes out of nowhere. Yeah, you didn't earn it, and it just kind of says, "Oh, surprise! You don't have to work as hard. It'll be fine."
Yeah. I was ready to really try.
Yeah. Kind of cheapens your sacrifice as a player and character, Yeah.
I think it's maybe from playing, more Dark Souls and From Software games, but now I feel like if I don't die at least once during a boss fight, then it was too easy.
It's so interesting. That was a really interesting question that you brought up, Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, it worked out. It was just kind of this experience. I was like, well, that kind of bugged me. Maybe it can be an interesting question. And you guys made it work. So.
Yeah, because it bugs us too.
Yeah.
But it was a good question. You brought up a good question. Yeah. Was there any more to that? Do you want to...
I think that's good, yeah. Good discussion.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Wow, that was fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm going to be thinking about that one for a bit. Thanks. All right, it's my turn.
Yeah.
All right. It's kind of connected to everything we've already been talking about. I guess we've all been on the same wavelength lately. Maybe it's because we're always talking about game design together, and we're starting to get synced up, as it were, or at least thinking about the same things. But anyway, okay. Here I go. So the first two games that I downloaded mods for ever a few years ago were the Sims 3 and Skyrim. In both of those games, I was trying to make the games more, immersive. Like that was what I was going for. That was the word. That was the thing. Immersive. Mm-hmm. I wanted to sink into the experience like we've been talking about and make it feel more like it was a real thing that I was really experiencing. And at that time, I believed, and I still believe, that a game experience which requires me to overcome challenges similar to those, or overcoming in a similar way to those that I might face in my life, would be more meaningful and compelling and fun. Like we talked about that in our last episode. Mm-hmm. I had an interesting journey. I'd like to walk you through it real quick. It's not too long, but here we go. So here's two examples from the mods that I downloaded for The Sims 3. Number one, in the core game, there's a taxi service, and every time you go anywhere in the game, you tell your Sim characters to go anywhere, the taxi will appear in front of your house, you'll get in the car, and then you'll drive there, and then you'll let you out. Free of charge, automatically, no waiting, nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's convenient, and it works. But I remember playing that game and wanting to buy a car at one point. But then realizing that I had no need to buy a car because it would have been functionally the exact same thing as using the free taxi, but it was more expensive. I'd have to spend like thousands of dollars on a car that would then be exactly the same as this free taxi. So I knew I could have just, and I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I could have just, quote, role-played the situation, pretending that I needed a car. But like we talked about in episode 6, I really, really need to have an in-game mechanical reason to do something. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it feels meaningless to me. Yeah. Kind of like what we were just talking about earlier this episode, where I want to feel the same needs that my characters are feeling in order to feel like I'm on the same, wavelength as them. Yeah. So I got a simple mod that requires me to, it's super simple and it worked pretty well. You just pay for the taxi every time. It just debits your bank account every time you get in the taxi and drive anywhere. So it worked. I ended up getting a bicycle first because I needed to get around and I didn't want to pay for the taxi every time. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately when I saved up enough money, I got cars. And then more cars as the family got bigger, which is fun. It was fun to, now my teenager needs a car. Oh man, can I afford it? But my teenager needs to get around and, fun simulation family type stuff, which the game is all about, So that's the first mod that I got for that game. So second one, also in the core game, you can go grocery shopping from your fridge. So you tell your Sims to make a salad. You click on the fridge, you say, make a salad. And so they'll walk over to the fridge and then it will say, okay, do you want to make a salad? It's going to cost you, 6 simoleons for the price of the full ingredients that you need or whatever. And you're like, yeah, let's do that. So you lose $6. Your Sim pulls a big old pile of ingredients out of the fridge and then makes a salad and then, eats it. Now this presented to me a similar problem to the taxi problem. Mm-hmm. Which is that I had zero reason to use this really cool grocery store that was in town to do, and I didn't have to do any meal planning because it was always just on demand at the fridge, zero struggle, nothing. And then and I didn't need to use my new minivan that I bought. I was like, I'd just gone through this whole thing where I got rid of the taxi problem by buying a car. But now I don't need to go anywhere. I realized I don't have any reason to go anywhere with this car. So I downloaded a mod that stopped me from being able to shop from the fridge, basically. It just says if you don't have the ingredients in your fridge, you can't make something with ingredients from the fridge. You can't just teleport ingredients to your fridge and then pull them out. So I ended up downloading a mod that stopped me from doing that. And I started driving down to the grocery store once a week to get the ingredients I needed. And I finally got to play with a lot of that immersive daily life gameplay that was rendered obsolete by the game itself in a game about simulating the daily life of a household, So, So I had to think, plan, make time, take care of it. Do I have the kids? Are they going to be at school? Maybe I should do it while they're at school. Maybe I should, it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So in both of those examples, I was disappointed that the game wasn't giving me the full experience that I bought the game to experience, which was, managing a household in all of that's daily life intricacies and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it worked really well when I got the mods, and I was really pleased with how it all played out. And I felt that I had learned what was important to me as a gamer, which was, in the word that I learned at that time, immersion, right? Which we've been talking about. Yeah. So here's the how that realization served me, ironically. I took this exciting new piece of wisdom and I used it to completely ruin Skyrim. In Skyrim, because, I love Skyrim, but there's a lot of frustrations that I have with it. Obviously, I talk about this like every episode. Mm-hmm. I was so excited about this immersion thing that I downloaded a bunch of mods that would help me feel more immersed in Skyrim, or so I hoped. So I downloaded this mod that stripped away all of the HUD elements in the hopes that the world would feel more real if it didn't have floating words or crosshairs or numbers or things like that on it. I got rid of the quest markers so that I'd have to find things myself or use an in-game map. instead of being told where to go, just like following the points or whatever. I took away like button prompts, so I would actually have to like look at items in the world and figure out based on its appearance whether it was something I could pick up, open, or interact with. Just by looking at it, like you do in real life. It's like, oh, in real life there's a book, I'm gonna open it up and read it. In Skyrim it's like, hey, read, and I wanted to get rid of that to see if that would help the thing or whatever. And none of this worked as I intended it to. So like without the HUD, for example, I couldn't tell how much health or stamina I had left, so I was like constantly pausing the game in the middle of a fight to see if I needed to drink a health potion or something like that. I couldn't tell where I was pointing my bow. Without the quest markers, I was just wandering all over the place and constantly pausing the game to look at my in-game map to go back to the world, and then back and forth over and over and over again, which should have just taken a few minutes to just walk there. And then without button prompts, I ended up like stealing things by mistake and getting into trouble. I couldn't find the switches or what I could interact with, and then, just did the wrong thing. So here, thank you for listening to my long journey through trying to find out what I liked about games and realizing that I don't know. But here's my question. Many games strive for an immersive experience like we've been talking about, and unfortunately there's a lot of disagreement about what that word actually means, even though it's on the marketing for everything and in the reviews for everything. But ignoring that entire discourse about what immersion actually means, I want to know what it means to you guys to actually have an immersive experience. Is that important to you? And then why? And I guess we've already kind of gone over some of that, but if there's anything that we didn't get, then let's hear that. And then I have some follow-up questions.
I have a gut reaction thought. That's cool.
Yeah.
I think for a while I thought that I needed to strip away everything that made me think I was in a game. I thought that immersion meant that I needed, like for me, it was like, okay, in order to be immersed in a game, I have to like forget I'm playing a game. So I shouldn't have like pause menus. I shouldn't have like inventory. Like, no, I want it to feel like I am this person, and I just have to work with the same tools that they have. And it naturally doesn't work because games aren't made that way. I remember playing The Witcher thinking, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of the minimap. It's such a pain. It's so unimmersive. And then I got lost so frequently, and I could not remember. And it was funny. I found myself just opening the map all the time, which was so tedious and so frustrating. All right, forget this. And I turned the minimap back on, and I enjoyed the game tremendously. But like, I don't know. I think of like games where with jank, like genuine weird stuff, like the Deus Ex, jumping back to that, with its weird controls that made me, constantly have to juggle my inventory in strange ways, or like weird animations or simple animations. My character doesn't reach out and open this door; the door opens automatically. That's not immersive, but it's. I would rather have a game with interesting systems where they didn't have to spend time animating the character opening up the door than just push the button and the door opens automatically. I'm more interested in having fun systemic interactions and having consistency than having it be pretty or having it look exactly like it should in real life. And it took me a while to figure that out.
Yeah, me too.
But I also have realized that I just don't notice. Like in Hitman, when the door opens automatically, it's like, well, I didn't even realize that it did that until I was watching for it one time recently. And it's like, here's a game that looks really realistic. The people are actually rendered in like great detail and stuff like that. But like,
he doesn't push the door open; it just swings open. And
in Hitman, button prompts appear above. Like every time you walk past a button, past a person, like, do you want to press Q to subdue? And that doesn't bother me anymore. Because I know. Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say that's key to the gameplay of that game.
Yeah.
Like, it's a puzzle game first and foremost, and you don't know what the pieces of the puzzle are until you can know what you're interacting with.
Yeah, you gotta know what you can interact with. That's something that kind of bugged me about Rain World when I started playing that, was that I just didn't know what I could do. And I had to eventually look it all up, and it became a lot more fun once I did, but I just didn't know because there's no interface. there's practically no interface, and it doesn't even tell you all the controls. It's all like this wordless kind of a thing. And I was like, just throw a menu in my face. Give me a health bar. Show me something gamey. But yeah, so that was kind of long, and I want to hear Aaron's thoughts on this as well. But
I've been having a lot of the same thoughts, and thank you for that, Nick. I think what it comes down to when you're talking about game immersion and the quote unquote video game elements taking away from it, I think it's about prioritizing focus. And if the video game can do video gamey things so that you're not focusing on a lot of the mundane video game things, then I think you're more focused on what the game, should be prioritizing, which is the world, the characters, and the story. If you do have kind of a busy HUD, but it gives you all the information that you need at a quick glance, so you're not constantly going through menus, so you're not looking things up in the guide, you can stay in that world more.
Yeah.
I mean, Zach, and Zach, I was just chuckling when you were talking about what you did, because I just knew exactly what that would do. It's like, oh, you're taking away the crosshairs in Skyrim? Like, are you nuts? Like, you know how janky the combat is?
Yeah.
And it was something I noticed. I mentioned this game before, but playing the first Devil May Cry, there's no button prompt for anything you can interact with. And there's a lot. I found that there was a lot I could interact with that didn't look like something I could interact with. Mm-hmm. And so it's spending a lot of time just kind of running through the same things over and over again. It's like, okay, can I interact with this? No. Okay, do I interact with this? No. It's like, oh, apparently interacting with this and this item I had that I had no idea I picked up or what it did causes me to progress. And so you spend so much time wondering where to go and wondering what your items do that you're not in the game, you're not immersed. Or something like a mini map in The Witcher, which I've often thought too. It's like, oh, well, what if I turn that off? And it's like, well, I want to explore, but I also want to explore like in the best way, like not just wandering around Velen trying to find where the swamp thing is I need to go. It's so I think it's about that focusing priorities, which is why games can get away with having these obvious video gaming things and still be immersive.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think that I think that games can focus in on trying to make, for example, a game in which you don't need a map, which would be a fun experience, and there are a lot like that work really well. Yeah. But I also don't think it's a problem in games that aren't built that way to have maps and things like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was thinking about the Witcher thing, and it's like, I actually did play that game without a mini map, and I because that was around the same time that I was going through this, immersion crisis, trying to make everything immersive and ruining everything as a result.
It needs to be real life.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people feel that way. Yeah. But I think that I've come to believe that I don't actually value it as much as I used to. I was thinking that one of the problems with that is that you just, at the end of the day, you are not Geralt of Rivia. Mm-hmm. You have not done this before. You have not been in Velen your entire life or whatever. Mm-hmm. You don't retread this same ground over and over every single day like you might if this was real life. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't, you're only here to play a very focused experience like we keep talking about on this series that doesn't have to do with learning the geography of the land that you're in, Yeah. And we ran into an interesting thing kind of recently. We were talking about stuff like Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop games, Nick and I. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's like a school of thought among certain dungeon masters that like you should remember everything. Like you shouldn't be able to ask your DM. I should say you shouldn't be able to ask your dungeon master what. For reminders about things because it's because your character doesn't get to ask reminders to the gods of the world. What happened before? I can't remember. Last week, like you can't actually ask, in real life if you're walking around, you can't just say, "Hey God or gods, whatever you believe in. What did I do last week? I can't remember. But the thing is, you also don't need to in real life.
Because you lived it.
Because you lived it. Whereas in something like Dungeons and Dragons, you went through shorthand narrative prose version of it. And that was, 1 hour last week or 2 hours last week, when in real life that would have taken you, it could have been, weeks of time that you're covering in those 2 hours or whatever. So it makes it really, you can't do it that way. I think that's the problem that I have with that particular thing.
I think it's the game's using a shorthand because it can't give you every experience. So it's like, all right, here, well, we're going to shorthand that stuff off to the side. We're going to shorthand your navigation. We're going to, because this isn't what you're here for. Yeah, that's not what we're going to focus on.
Right.
You're not you're not here to play Battlefront without a reticle in the middle of the screen, which I once tried. It was actually kind of fun. I just played the new Battlefront without any HUD. You can't see anything. You can't even tell where you're aiming.
Yeah.
But like that's not why you're there. That's not what the experience is. And so I think that it makes sense that the games shorthand that and sometimes abstract that. Kind of jump it back to our abstraction conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what? This isn't exactly how it is in real life, maybe, but
it won't be that anyway.
Yeah, it's not going to deliver that experience because you're not this person. And so
you aren't your Skyrim character, and you're not Geralt of Rivia, and you're not your Dungeons and Dragons character. You don't live in their mind all the time. You live in their mind, a few times a week for an hour or so,
And so if games give you prompts to tell you that this is the button to punch this person, I appreciate that. Yeah. I appreciate that more than forgetting the button to punch someone because I forgot how to punch someone because I haven't played the game in 2 weeks.
Yeah, in real life, you know how to punch somebody all the time.
Exactly, yeah. There's no point in real life where you're wondering, can I interact with this object in front of me? This half holograms that we're dealing with, and it's like, oh yeah, this is realistic to not it's like, no, we know it. We know we know the rules of our universe. The game has to, because it's cheating a bit, because it's trying to streamline a certain experience, it has to teach us those rules,
right?
And I think we've talked about this a little bit with effective tutorials, but I think the shorthand that the game uses, even if it's on screen or an obvious button prompt, so long as it can get you to understand those rules so that you can engage in the world in the way that it wants you to. I don't think that takes away from the immersion.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
No.
I'm trying to think if I guess we've talked about it a little bit that when you do turn these things off, you're not immersed because you get lost in things. But I guess maybe the flip side of that, and I guess we probably mentioned this in like tutorial stuff too, a game that maybe treats you too like babies you too much in its prompts and in its HUD and in its direction and things. I do know one thing. I was playing Horizon Zero Dawn, and its default mapping system was to have kind of footsteps on your map of like exactly where, like you look down and you can follow this line exactly to your objective. And I got, a little bit ways in the game. It's like, I'm not engaging in this environment at all. Like I found myself in this city full of people, and I'm just like, I haven't even looked around. And so I went to the map and I toggled that off, so it just showed the icon of where the thing is at. And it was so much better.
Yeah.
So I think that could be. Yeah. You're just looking and feel like, okay, it follows, literally streamlined to what you're doing, but in an open world game, like you kind of want to broaden out. And I think that can be a game thing too, that the more experience you become with games, like, having already played The Witcher, if I started up a new game, I might turn the HUD completely off because I have a general idea of where things are at and kind of where I need to go, and could use that experience to just take in the world more.
Yeah.
And so I think games affording those options really helps as well, that you can kind of choose your own playstyle based on your experience of the game.
Yeah, that's a pretty clever solution, I think.
I think so too.
Just like let the player customize. Okay, well, I don't need this. I do need this.
And I found something for me that helps me decide on those sorts of things, is that I have found I like it when games give me enough information to make my own decisions. I do not like it when they make my decisions for me. So when Horizon Zero Dawn says, this is your objective, I need to know that because I need to know where I'm going. But when Horizon Zero Dawn says, put your left foot here and your right foot here and your left foot here, oh my gosh, leave me alone.
Stop. Do the hokey pokey, turn around. And...
Exactly. And so when I played The Witcher...
Sounds like my managers that I've worked for in the past.
Yeah. So when I played The Witcher, I turned the mini-map back on, but I got rid of the little dotted line that shows me where to walk. I just kept the arrow that said, hey, your objective's in that direction. And I find that when I have... I need enough information. I need to know what I can do. I got to know what I can do in the game. I got to know what the person knows, whether that's handled in shorthand or not. So, yeah. I guess we've kind of gone on a tangent, but...
That's okay. I mean, it was all relevant. Yeah. Well, thanks. We've gone through all my questions. I realized that it kind of already answered all of this stuff. So,
hey.
But that was cool.
Tangents work.
This was cool. It's cool. Thanks for answering my question.
Yeah. Good question.
All right. Well, we'll just call it there. It's a little bit early, but we'll call it there. So, let us move on to our final segment. We're going to do our game recommendation bit, which is called Think of a Good Game. And we'll start with Nick. Do you have one?
I do have
cool.
one.
Tell us a good game.
I will tell you a good game. Another game from my childhood on that train of thought. I adore Little Big Planet 2. I think it is utterly fantastic. It's Media Molecule, I believe, is the company that made it, and it's a little older now. There's been a Little Big Planet 3, and as you might have guessed, there was a Little Big Planet 1. But I think Little Big Planet 2 is one of the most charming, uninhibitedly it captures that joyous, creative childhood imagination kind of a thing, and it's a game about creativity and all that kind of stuff, and you can make your own levels, and it's really fun, and there's a whole lot to do with it. But I think even just the campaign, the main story that you play through, is something that I have returned to again and again because I think it's just delightful and charming, and I love it a lot. So Little Big Planet 2, it's a PlayStation 3 game. It's great. I love it. It has brought me much joy. I've played it more than most other games in my life.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, if PlayStation could just get their stuff on the PC.
Yeah, there was a project for a while to get Little Big Planet onto the PC, actually, and as you might have imagined, it was shut down.
Yeah, that sounds like it would have been. Yeah. All right, Aaron.
I think they are porting more of their games, but
that's good.
Yeah, it's kind of selective.
Always nice.
Anyway, yes. So my game recommendation, to show you how recently I've come to the gaming world, and especially PC games. This week I played Portal for the first time.
Oh, really?
Ooh.
Yes. The 2007 puzzle platformer by Valve of Steam fame, and it's great. I mean, I knew, here's the thing. I was I'm a college student. I had this homework I needed to do. My mind was kind of blah. So I was like, maybe I'll play this puzzle game for a little bit and kind of get some gears moving. And then 3 hours later, I was like, I gotta go to bed. But it's really smart in its puzzles and its design, and also how there's kind of this weird, kind of creepy world underneath that you kind of find out about the piece by piece. And it's it doesn't tell you too much about the puzzles. You're just kind of given the tools and thrown into the room and have to figure it out based on what you've done before. And it's really satisfying when you can figure it out. It reminds me, I played some PC games when I was younger, but there are like a few games, I do not remember the name of them. I don't even remember a lot of the story of things, but just these instances and these moments of some of these other puzzle games that kind of come to mind. And so playing parts of Portal like kind of made me nostalgic for some of those early puzzle PC games.
Interesting.
And it was like, oh man, I know I played some game that had like a portal thing as part of its mechanics, and I thought it was really cool. And like I've seen these images, I was like, I have no idea what that game was called or like what it was, but like I feel similarly now with this game. So it's really cool. Yeah, Portal. It's on Steam. It's really cheap. Check it out. I imagine both of you guys have probably played it.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a fun one. I never finished the second one, although I got passably far. It's funny. I was thinking about Portal actually. It's got this moment that I got stumped on for like an hour because the entire game you are using portals to get through all of the challenges. Like that's the whole point of the game, like that's the mechanic that you're given. And then like right at the end of the game, I got stuck in this room for like an hour and I got so frustrated trying to figure out, I couldn't figure out where to put my portals to get out of there or anything. And then it turns out that there was a door that you just need to open. but I don't remember like ever opening a door in that game before. Maybe it happened at like the beginning like once or something, but the whole game is about using portals. And then all of a sudden I'm supposed to use a door.
And there's no button prompt for it either, right?
There's no button prompt. There's nothing. It's just, just remember that you can open doors. And it's, I didn't know. It's a game about portals. Why'd you even have a door? It should just be an open entry.
So funny.
Anyway.
Yeah. Maybe if, like, in the very first room you opened a door or something, and then it's a callback at the end.
Maybe it is, but honestly, like, I don't remember opening a door.
I don't think I've opened a door.
I think I remember
played a few hours. So
yeah.
Keep that in mind so you don't have the same problem.
If you get stuck, look for a door.
If you ever get stuck,
when there's a door, try to open it.
Yeah.
Gosh, I got so mad. Anyway, thank you. That's a good game recommendation. I like Portal. All right, mine's a little bit specific. So I got a huge kick out of playing the Guild 2 Renaissance, which is a standalone expansion for the Guild 2, which is a medieval life simulator game where you control... It's kind of like The Sims, but it's in the Middle Ages, and it's all about running a guild or working in a guild, which, as you might imagine, is terrible. But it's so much fun. I love it. It's I play Crusader Kings for a lot of the same reasons. I like this medieval life sim thing. But it's great. You're trying to vie for political power by lobbying for office. You use really underhanded, shady techniques a lot of the time to get yourself into power politically, and in your economic, guilds or whatever. You control you start with a single character and then you try to establish a dynasty, by getting married and then having children and then bringing them up in the guild by revoking their ability to choose what they want to do with their life. Medieval stuff. It's great. I love it. And it's a lot of fun. It's super janky. And I think that I had to, when I was playing it, I had to download a mod just to fix the bugs and stuff like that, because it's not a super big budget thing. I think it's a spin-off. It's it's not even the main entry in the franchise.
It's a spin-off,
standalone spin-off. Yeah.
You need to make it more immersive for those mods.
Yeah. It just needs to work. And like honestly, like a lot of it was just me learning how to get around the bugs in order to play the game. So like if it's not that compelling to you, I don't think I would recommend it. But I had so much fun with it. It's great. Anyway, that's the Guild 2 Renaissance. It's so weird. I love it.
Hey, all of our games were 2. Oh no, Aaron's was the first Portal. I thought for a moment it was Portal 2. I would have recommended 2. But I was wrong.
So maybe next time, yeah. I gotta play through the first one.
Maybe next time. All right. Well, thank you. That was good. And that's it for today. We're gonna have another couple episodes before we get to our episode or our game highlight in a couple of weeks, which is going to be Hades, which we've all been playing and all enjoying quite a bit. It is a lot of fun, and I think we're going to have a lot to talk about in 2 weeks. So keep on
It's hard
listening.
to play other games.
What's that?
It is. It's hard to play.
I said it's hard for me to play other games. Like even somebody who's had successful runs with it, I was like, oh, I should play this game. It's like, yeah, but Hades.
Hades.
I could play Hades.
I could do it. I could do another run. I could.
It is so fun.
It is a blast. And you know what? I fully expected to think it was the stupidest thing ever when I started playing it. And honestly, for the first 3 sessions, I didn't like it at all. And then session 4 was as long as sessions 1, 2, and 3 altogether, and so every time after that I've been, this is over, we're gonna play this again, and now I do it like whenever I'm like, I got 30 minutes, I can play some Hades. Oh man, yeah, I'm excited to talk about.
Well, that's awesome. I'm super stoked to get into it.
Yeah. So to our listeners, thanks for listening. This was Games by Design. We'll be back next week. Nick will be hosting an episode. Woohoo! And check out Hades before we get to talking about it. Thank you for listening, and that's it for today. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.